Welcome to another. Namaste, everybody. Welcome to another talk hosted by Texas Hindu Students Council. This is a talk on Gurukul education with Siddhartha Jagganath. My name is Pratik Agnor, a coordinator for Texas HSC, and I'll be moderating tonight's discussion. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind everyone of our goal for creating this organization, and that is to create a network or a sort of a space for students across Texas to get involved with Hindu advocacy mainly. If you're interested in joining Texas HSC, please visit our Instagram page, and the link to the forum will be in our bio, and it's also right there below. And after you fill it out, we'll get in contact with you. And yeah, without further ado, let's introduce Siddhartha Jagganath. Yeah, so Siddhartha studied in a Gurukulam after high school. He's fluent in Sanskrit. He studies Carnatic music, and he's also, in addition to that, the president of Stanford HSA, and he's a second year at Stanford University. So yeah, let's get into it. Siddhartha, so what was your experience at the Gurukulam like, and what was the environment like there?
Yeah, so I guess I could sort of set the stage for this. So after high school, after I applied to college, I decided to take a gap year, primarily because I wanted to sort of take a year off before I got to college, and then the whole, the rat race of life begins. Sort of take some time off and spend some time, studying things I liked, including Carnatic music and Sanskritam, particularly Vyakarnam, which is like grammar. And in order to do that, I decided to go to a place in Chhattisgarh called Bilaspur. And in Bilaspur, there is this Gurukulam that is run by this scholar and pandita by the name of Pushpa Dikshit Mataji. So she is one of the foremost scholars in Panini, Ashtadhyayi, and Vyakarnam, so grammar, Sanskrit grammar. And she's sort of famous for having developed her own methodology surrounding the way in which they study the Ashtadhyayi. So her Gurukulam was on my radar for a while, and I had known people who had gone there and studied and had great things to say about it. So I decided to take the time off not only to study Sanskritam, but also as a way of teaching myself how to live on my own in a place where I actually didn't know the language. I didn't speak Hindi before going to Chhattisgarh. So it's kind of going there and really not knowing anything and just sort of facing life as it comes kind of thing. So it was sort of double-sided in that sense. But yeah, so I went there, and it was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. It was the first time I'd ever stayed away from home for that amount of time. It was almost more than a year. It was like 13 or 14 months. It was like, it's a 2-day, like a day and a half train ride from Chennai. So, and as someone who's from the US and grew up in the US, it's definitely very different. And I think it was important for me at least to have those sort of experiences before I went to college. And got all that independence. So yeah, I mean, I basically went there, 2 sets of clothes, 2 dhotis, 2 kurtas. That's it. And just some books, notebooks, everything I learned how to cook there. Because once you're there in a Gurukulam, it's not like a traditional school. You have to contribute and be part of that ecosystem, right? So you had to learn how to cook for a lot of people. You serve, you clean vessels, you wash clothes by hand. So that was another whole thing, learning how to wash your clothes, getting used to that, like washing it by hand on the washing stone, all that stuff. So yeah, it was just like it's kind of this mass stimulus to your senses, right? It's completely different from anything that an average suburban American teenager would normally experience. And that was the idea. So not only was I getting this experience, I was also, spending time learning Sanskritam, which is important in its like own way. But yeah, it was amazing. I mean, Mataji, Pushpa Dikshit Mataji, who runs the place, one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. So that alone was made it so worth it. Going there and learning Vyakarnam from the foremost scholar in the subject. I also made a bunch of friends from different, like a variety of different backgrounds. People who come from Nepal, Vrindavan, Varanasi, and all these places, and they have such interesting stories to tell. They are from such different backgrounds, different from mine at least, you know. And it is good to, for me, it was great to, you know, expose myself to people who had like real problems, who come from poverty, who travel, you know, days and days by train from the Nepalese border. So it's that kind of experience that I was sort of seeking when I went there, and I really got it. I got a good dosage of that before heading out to college. So yeah, that's kind of what it was like.
Man, that's crazy. So did you know like any Sanskrit or like Devanagari before, or or you just decided to go to Gurukulam just straight out of high school?
So I had been studying Sanskritam with Samskrita Bharati, which is a great organization. If anyone ever wants to get into Sanskritam from like zero level, they start. So they do like Sambhashana Shibirams, which are basically like conversational Sanskritam. And so that was a good starting point for me, because, you know, I was 12 or 13 at the time, or I think even earlier than that. And so yeah, that's how I got into Sanskritam. And as I progressed, I kind of sort of found Vyakaranam, grammar, to be the most interesting part of the language to me, and so which is why I chose to go to this place, this Gurukulam in particular. So yeah, I did have some background in Sanskrit language, in Sanskritam as a language. The Hindi part was the more difficult one, actually.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So the next question. So how has learning Sanskrit helped you in your academic and professional career so far?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a great question. You know, how is all of this relevant? Because I think if you're trying to market Sanskritam as a learning proposition to any teenager my age, or it's always important to tell them sort of what the value is in it, right? I mean, am I learning a good language, or why am I doing it? So I think it's definitely something that was worth it for me, particularly even with like me learning computer science and everything. So as a background, I'm currently studying computer science at university, but I never really had a computer science background. I had never really coded before going to college. And so once I was there, it kind of just came naturally. It happened. And I think a good reason, a big part of that was me learning Sanskritam. And I'll tell you why, because, and Vyakaranam in particular in this case, because the way Sanskrit Vyakaranam works, right? It's extremely structural. It's like a framework, essentially, even in software, right? When you have frameworks, you have like utility classes, libraries. It's basically that, in the sense that in order to construct something like a very basic word, any basic word. So if I have the word patati, right? It's a Sanskritam word that you may have all heard. It means to read. So even if I want to get to that verb form and that word in its full form, there's like a systematic, algorithmic way of doing it. I take a verb root, which is the dhatu pat, then I add a pratyaya, or add two pratyayas, tip, and then a vikarna pratyaya, and then I get pathati. I mean, the details are irrelevant, but the idea is that I can basically create any word I want from scratch, and there's a set way to do that. And but it's also not that simple, since a language is a language, and there's a million different ways to express things in a million different words. And so for each of those words, the idea in Sanskritam is that there should be a set way of getting to that word. I should be able to derive it from nothing. And so that's sort of, and in order to do that, you need to have a very strategic and framework in order to do that. And so learning Sanskritam for me, and learning the Ashtadhyayi and the way the sutras and all work, it teaches you that kind of thinking, that problem solving sort of that you need, that computer science requires. Like, computer science is a really general subject. It's anyone can do it, and the reason is it's just problem solving. I mean, if you forget the whole language as part of it, it's just problem solving.
Right.
So in order to do that, it's just developing those skills, and I think that's why, as someone who didn't know anything about computer science really before going to college, I was able to sort of keep up. And that's not to say I'm smart. I'm really not. It's just the fact that I had that exposure to that kind of thinking, and that's what Sanskritam really did for me. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, learning Sanskrit, helps you develop these problem-solving skills, and these help you with today's world. So like that kind of leads me to my next question. How does the Gurukulam education how does that kind of, not only the Sanskrit, but how does the Gurukulam education relevant to today's world? Because obviously, you know, today there's a lot of Western style education, right? So how does that kind of relate to what you're doing during that 1 year?
No, that's a good question, because I mean, like the idea of this whole session is decolonizing modern education, right? So, and I think Gurukulam is a great place. The Gurukulam style of education is a great place to look. I think, you know, the factory model of like modern schooling is something that has to be changed. So I actually never really went to traditional school in any capacity. I was homeschooled for pretty much my entire life. And in high school, I was in online school, took online class. So I never was in the physical classroom format until college. And a good part of the reason for that was this: my mom didn't want to sort of subscribe to that traditional form of schooling, because for her it felt like we were sort of just giving up 8 hours a day to learn things that we didn't really have a say in. And that's not to like say that, you know, math and science and all those things that we learned in school are not important, which they are. And I learned, you know, I did my math and I did my English, I did all of that. But it's also being able to devote time to doing things like Sanskrit and being able to make that choice, right? And have the power to make that choice for yourself. And so that's where the Gurukulam education, I think, comes in, because it's so different from, and it's so much more than traditional schooling. Because, for instance, when I went to this Gurukulam in Chhattisgarh, you know, it's not just about learning; it's about contributing to the place you're living at. You have to. The education is free, but you have to also be a part of that ecosystem, that family. So you have to, again, like cooking, you know, cleaning people's clothes, serving, sort of just contributing and learning how to give. I think as much as you take, because you're taking in vidya, but then you're giving back at the same time. And so in a lot of ways, developing that sense, that attitude, right, is another huge part of why the Gurukulam system is so great. And yeah, it's a different mindset, it's a different approach to education. It's focused. You learn a very specific skill. In my case, Vyakaranam, but it could be anything. It could be Chanda Shastram, you know, poetics, anything. Or Veda Adhyayanam, if you want to go become a priest, or you do Veda Adhyayanam, you go to Gurukulam to do that. But so the idea is that it's anything really. And I think that's a lot of that is a part of, you know, our colonized mindsets. A lot of Indians, I think, have this very colonized mindset, and you can't blame them really. We were ruled for so long, but a result of that is us subscribing to this form of modern education. And I think in order to sort of shed ourselves of that, we have this treasure trove of knowledge in the form of what our ancestors have given us, and one part of that is the Gurukulam system. So if you can look back to where we came from, I think we can get a lot of great ideas. I mean, that's what the West, in fact, has been doing with our culture for such a long time. They mine ideas like Ayurveda, which Aveda is a huge company, where it's the mind sciences with meditation. And for instance, like now, turmeric shots or coconut oil and all these things that I've been eating and using for my entire life. And my mom before me, and then my grandmother before her. So, and these are all things that are so built into our culture we don't even realize. But then when Starbucks comes out with a turmeric shot, we're like, oh wow, I should try that too. We've been eating that in like sambar or something our whole life. That's a silly example, but it sort of like proves my point that I think it's important for us to, especially in college. So let's talk about, since HSC is focused around that, right? In the college environment, I think a lot of Indian culture and subscription to Indian culture is, you know, around Bollywood and you know, our South Asian societies of the world. And I think that's great. I think that's wonderful to have. But at the same time, I think Indians should be aware of their culture and heritage and be proud of it. And that's where I think HSC plays such an important role. And also in making people understand that, you know, Hinduism and being a Hindu is not just doing puja and stopping there. It's about sort of believing, or sort of, you know, tapping into your identity and being proud of who you are, just as much as look at any other culture on campus, which I've always been amazed at how proud they are of where they came from. And I find over and over again that it seems to be the Indian students that have a hard time, you know, wanting to just be themselves. It's always a matter of us trying to fit in. So yeah, so that's what really I found. And anyway, so that's really how the Gurukulam system, I think, fits in to what we consider modern education and how we can maybe learn from that.
Yeah, definitely. You know, the dharmic system is definitely very, very different from the Western education system. And yeah, like you kind of explained like the college side of it, but um, that it leads me into my next question. What's your experience as a Hindu on the Stanford campus so far? I know like part of your experience is kind of gone because of COVID, but you know, your first year and your first half of your second year, how was that?
So it was great. And I'm someone who does, like, for instance, I can give you like a good, like, a story about being a Hindu on campus. And so when I went to college, I do Sandhya Vandanam 2 times a day, and I do music practice and all that stuff. But a part of that I thought would be difficult, being with a roommate and things like that on campus. If people eat meat in the room, I wouldn't be too comfortable with that. And if
Right.
I get up early in the morning to do Sandhi, and I want peace and quiet during that time or in the evening. So anyway, as I think, so something I did was I went to the Office of Religious Life, and I said I want all these accommodations because I have all these practices, and they're more than happy to accommodate me, and give me a single, which most people don't get. Because I subscribe to these practices and I do Sandhya and all those things. The reason I say this is I find that most Hindus, when they come to campus, I have friends who've done this. They kind of just shed everything as they come to college to sort of just fit in and shed their practices, all of that stuff. And
Yeah,
why?
yeah.
American colleges especially are so accommodating of all those things.
Mhm.
And my case is like just one example. And so I think, so for me, being a Hindu on campus has been wonderful in that sense. It's because of the way American education is American higher level education is structured. They accommodate different cultures and different religious beliefs and things like that. But it's just a matter of us making use of it and tapping into
Exactly.
those resources, tapping into our Office of Religious Life and everything, and making sure that they accommodate us for who we are. And I think so. For me, that's sort of what's characterized my time at Stanford as a Hindu, though as short-lived as it was.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, the colleges definitely are very accommodating, but I think for most people, it's like, you know, they just want to fit in with the rest of the other students,
Yeah.
and that's part of the
Mhm.
reason why they kind of leave their background and their culture, and yeah, that's why they want to fit in. But yeah, I mean, my next question is, you know, what's kind of your experience with setting up Stanford HSA and your experience now with keeping it going forward?
Mhm. So I think the thing with Stanford HSA is the Hindu Students Association is we're kind of in it's been great so far, the experience. At least within COVID, we've had a Deepavali
Okay.
celebration on all those things we do, and they've gone well. But like anything, it's important to make sure that a Hindu students organization doesn't fall into this rut of just being a puja organization,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
being something more than that, and really representing Hindus on campus from not just a religious perspective but a cultural perspective. And I think that's what I've been trying to do with HSA is really, for one just try to incorporate it into a larger network of Hindu student groups, which is HSC in this case, which has been great for us. Is getting to know other Hindu students from other campuses across the U.S.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, HSC has done wonders. But again, it's from what the problems we faced have been that mainly just being isolated, just doing one kind of being a very one-dimensional organization. And HSC has definitely helped us kind of build a vision for what we want the Hindu Students Association at Stanford to be like. And yeah, so in that sense, we're very grateful to HSC.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think a lot of other, it's not just Stanford HSA, it's many other Hindu organizations across the United States and the West in general. You know, we have a problem with really
Yeah.
representing our true like roots and not just like a just you know just pujas for show and you know
Mhm.
Diwalis and things like that. So yeah, you know I think this was a great talk. Just to wrap it up, is there anything you want to say
I
for
think
Stanford
there's one
HSA?
question I can answer. Saw it pop up in the comments. What are the differences you see between authentic Vedic concepts that you mentioned, like Ayurveda, compared to when these are appropriated in the West, what would be like. Okay, yeah, sure. So with things like Ayurveda, what I found is sort of like the concepts, the core concepts are taken, but it's ultimately desacralized. So for instance, when we do Surya Namaskaram, right, in yoga, there are mantrams that are to be said along with the actual postures that we do. So when you go and do yoga in a class on campus, for instance, all those are taken out of it. So it's really detaching the core of our culture from the actual culture. And a great example of what's happening there is even on college campuses, when we do things like Deepavali and we do things like even pujas and different events. A lot of what we see is like sort of diluting or homogenizing the nature of these actual things. So if for instance for Deepavali, a lot of it just starts to circle around performances, as opposed to what the actual meaning of Deepavali is from a ritual point of view, from a religious point of view. We've had some incidents of just basically everything getting diluted. And basically the reputation of the event being basically around food, and like Bollywood dance performances. And I think that sort of thing becomes dangerous. It's all great. I think all those we need those sort of events to as one element of it. But I think it's important not to forget the core of what Diwali represents for Hindus. And if we lose that, I think we lose the essence of what it means to be a Hindu.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think metaphorically, that's metaphorically, that's what's most important. About Diwali. I think someone else was asking a question. What are the issues associated with mapping current anti-racism frameworks onto decolonizing indigenous traditions?
So from how I see this really is, I'm sure there are issues when you go into the nitty gritty. There's always going to be conflicts because every situation is different. Particularly the Hindu situation is different. We are a minority, but we're not a minority in the same way I think that a lot of other minorities are. But I think we can use it to our advantage. In the sense that, for instance, like my religious beliefs getting accommodated by the Office of Religious Life at my college, and so if there are going to be issues, I think, but I think we can also use it to our benefit, because we are a minority group that has been a victim of these sort of things in the past, and I think we just have to use it in the best way we can.
Yeah, definitely. I think you kind of answered most people's questions here. Is there anything you want to say to the audience?
No, I mean, other than thank you, HSC, for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you, Pratik, today.
You too. You too, Siddhartha. I think that's it. I thank you everyone for coming. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Namaste.
Namaste.